Welcome to episode 62 of our series on the surnames of Appalachia and the American South. On today's show, we'll dig deeper into the list of requested surnames. Now, there are about 650 that we haven't covered, so I appreciate your patience as I make my way through them. So grab a cup of coffee and join me. Let's get started. Number 1, Dawes or Dawes. One of the best pictures that I've seen outside of my favorite space-age sci-fi movies released in the last decade is Hacksaw Ridge. It's based on a true story about Desmond Dawes, a Virginia fellow who willingly went to the front lines in the Pacific Theater in World War II. You might be thinking, big deal. I've seen all kinds of war pictures. Well, I'm glad for you. For the rest of us, though, I have to say that Desmond Dawes won the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he never ever carried a weapon. He was a medic and a conscientious objector, kind of like Sergeant Alvin C. York in World War I. But he risked his life to save over 70 men who lay wounded on the battlefield, including some Japanese soldiers that he tried to save. For what it's worth, I think Vince Vaughn's portrayal of Sergeant Howe, his drill instructor, is hilariously effective. And by the way, he stayed with him and was even with him when he was wounded on Hacksaw Ridge. I highly recommend Hacksaw Ridge, folks. Desmond's family name goes way back in time before his ancestors migrated to Virginia. You might be suspecting that anyway. Most names did exist before we came to America. But anyway, it's an Anglo-Hebrew diminutive for the son of David. Dawes has a small presence in Scotland. It first appears in the Scottish records in the 17th century, but it's not found among the traditional surnames of Ireland or Wales. A paper trail will most likely lead you to England or Scotland. Number 2, Sandifer. We Americans like to create some name spellings of our own, and Sandifer is no exception. That's a practice that can make genealogical work pretty tiresome, folks. I gotta admit that. Sandifer is an Americanized English surname. It was given to one who dwelled near a sandy ford. You might recall that a ford is a stream or river crossing. The original English spelling is simply put Sandiford. It comes to us from the Delamere Forest in Cheshire, England. I couldn't find it among the traditional surnames of any country outside of England, so I think we're more than safe in calling Sandifer an Americanized form of a Middle English family name. Now, in case you're wondering when the era known as Middle English occurred, it was between 1150 and 1450 AD. Number 3, Estes. In Richmond, Virginia, there's a trucking company that employs some 20,000 people. Estes Trucking, founded in 1931 by W. Estes, is an American success story. It's still operated by the Estes family. And recognizing that fact, I was delighted to cover their family name. As I've mentioned a few times on the Vanntage point, simple names can have multiple origin stories like my name, Van. But in this case, I think that we can be confident that Estes is another Middle English surname that was given to someone who lived in the eastern part of a village. Of course, it could also have been given to someone from the east, which in the year 1200 would be most of the world's population, because almost everybody was in the continent of Europe or Asia or Africa, and they're all east of England. At least one online source, though, points to Kildare, Ireland for the meaning, but in its origin, but that's a dubious claim, folks. I gotta admit, it's just a dubious claim. I would go with English for the origin of Estes. Number 4, Rodgers. Rodgers or Rogier. When I received the request for Rodgers, I got excited because my maternal great-great-grandmother was a Rodgers from the extreme southwestern corner of North Carolina. On my dad's side, my cousin, the comedian Will Rodgers, was proud of his Van blood. We're proud of him too, I got to say that. I could tell you some stories about that connection and my dad, but it's a bit too far off from our topic today. So I'll pivot back to the surname. Rogier is a rather popular French name. It entered the Isles with the French-speaking Normans in the 11th century. Those invaders took wives or sent home for their spouses. When a Rogier had a son, an S was added to form Rodgers. Looking outside of England and France, I first found Rodgers in Scotland. It appeared in the Scottish records as far back as 1152. is found in Ireland as a form of McCrory. You will need a paper trail to locate the origin of your line of Rodgers. Number 5, Barnes. This surname has something of a complicated history. It can be linguistically English or Old Norse. In England, it was applied to a dweller by the barn. The ES was added to identify the son of barn or to refer to more than one of those good old boys. Beginning in the 9th century, Vikings introduced words into the language of the Angles, that's the English language. Their barns referred to a noble warrior. Now, I'll leave it to you to decide which origin appeals more to your tastes. I could just see it this way. Let's see now. I'm a descendant of a noble warrior, or I'm a descendant of a dweller by a barn. That's a tough choice right there. If you're a man or have a dude in your paternal line who's willing to get a Y chromosome DNA test, you can test for a Norse ancestor. Any haplogroup besides RDF13, RDF23, or RM222 could point to a Scandinavian origin. Now, there were people with those haplogroups also in Scandinavia, but they were few and far between. Most of them were brought there as slaves. Number 6, Easton or Easton. I must admit that when I received this request, I recalled scenes from the 1980s TV show Miami Vice. In those scenes, the wee Scottish lass Sheena Easton, she's only 5'1", made several appearances as Sonny Crockett's love interest. As Sheena's ethnicity suggests, her surname is considered Scottish. With that said, though, there are Easton folk in England and Ireland. McClysick claims that in Ireland, Easton can have two origins. One involves the anglicization of the Gaelic and the Scottish practice of using the name as an alternate form of Adamson. Adamson, not Adamson, Adamson. It's interesting to note that the founder of the Pennsylvania colony, William Penn, was married to Lady Juliana Fermor. Lady Penn's Northamptonshire estate was called Easton Neston. The city of Easton, Pennsylvania was named after her estate, not the Scottish family. While there's a good chance that your line is Scottish, a paper trail just might lead you to Ireland or England. Number 7, Ashcroft or Ascroft. That's kind of an unfortunate name, especially if it had two S's in it. Now, there are at least two communities named Ashcroft in North Carolina. One is in Clay, North Carolina, and the other is a townhouse neighborhood in Clayton, North Carolina. John Ashcroft served as governor and U.S. Senator from Missouri. He also served as the U.S. Attorney General under George W. Bush. You might note this, John's wife Janet is an outstanding lawyer in her own right. She's also a proud graduate of Regent University in Virginia. Now, you may recall that her alma mater was founded by the late Pat Robertson, the televangelist and former Republican Party candidate for the presidency in 1980. Despite sounding like a regal English name, Ashcroft was first given to an English person who lived on an East Croft, or in an East Croft, or an eastern small field. I can find Ashcroft among the traditional surnames of Ireland or Wales, or Scotland for that matter. So I'm confident that Ashcroft is an English surname with a humble origin story. Well, folks, that's all I have for you today. I greatly appreciate those of you who have subscribed and write notes for the discussion board. It's a pleasure for me to exchange messages with you. I'm learning quite a bit from you. Now I feel like I've got a community of friends. If demand continues to warrant it, I'll be back soon with another episode of The Vantage Point. Until I see you again, may the good Lord bless and keep you. May He make His face shine on you and give you grace. Bye-bye.